program. So IDP is the new term. Well, in Georgia, they had a 6-year-old who was acting up, and they handcuffed him. And when they called his mother to the school, she was surprised to see her child handcuffed. She said she understood the program to be okay, hands on, meaning they could hold the child, embrace the child, but not put a stranglehold on the child and not crush the child's ribs or sit on them and things like that. So again, in the field of education, the first question will be: is education colorblind?
Okay. See, I will go back to our formula, so to speak, and our understanding, the understanding that we all need to embrace, in my view, is that we are in a total system structure of racism, white supremacy. The total system structure of racism, white supremacy is not for the purpose of the maximal development of the black genetic and constitutional potential. And so black children are not to be educated at the highest level within the system of racism, white supremacy. They are not supposed to be treated with the highest level of respect. And this is not just in the schools. I mean, this embraces the whole totality of a child's experience. In other words, if a child is born into a family situation wherein the father is unemployed and the mother is on drugs, we can't say, if we understand system structure of racism, we can't say these are bad parents. What we can say is that these parents are victims of the system of racism, white supremacy, and that just logically, that if the parents have major problems as a result of the system of racism, white supremacy, the children in that household setting are going to also feel the brunt of the problems that the parents have within the system structure of racism, white supremacy. And then the child leaves home and goes to school. The school is not structured to be about the maximal development of black children, the maximal development of their genetic and constitutional potential. You see, within the system structure of racism, white supremacy, it's not a mystery how to make certain that children receive a superb education. See, if you're going to be a recipient of a maximal educational experience, you're not going to be in an overcrowded classroom. It's just like you're not going to be in a poor environment where there's no low-income housing or no moderate-income housing and no supermarkets or, no income where people can afford the best food, the best vegetables. So it's a whole system structure that is not about the maximal development of black people. It is about the inferiorization. Some people receive in the system structure of racism, white supremacy, if you're to be a part of the supremacy set, then you are going to be the recipient of what the system offers to affect the superiorization of certain people. And on the contrary, if you are not a part of who is supposed to be superior, then you are going to be inferiorized or you're going to be mistreated. It's just like I go to the example of, so black people were very excited with the idea of the first black president. But if we, just dare to look at what has happened to the first black president and his family, it's 24/7 demeanment. 24/7 demeanment. Or 24/7 attempts to make certain that he fails or attempting to make certain that he fails. Now, to the extent that he has avoided that, but that doesn't mean that the intent, the spoken intent, was to see that he fails. Black man, superior education, highly intelligent, but the goal objective is to see that he fails.
Absolutely. Black men of, I want to use the term superior education, higher education, and their mark in history. Specifically, I'm going to go to Du Bois, because Du Bois is a quite interesting figure in history. Did he, in his writings, comprehend racism, white supremacy, and in his life wanted to live out the fantasy of inclusion, and in his death come to the reality of the system of racism, white supremacy? Your opinion on Du Bois?
Well, again, Du Bois was a genius of a person. Whether he understood it, in his writing where he said the problem of the 20th century is the question of the color line between the lighter and the darker races of mankind. So Du Bois did recognize racism. Now, did he think in terms of racism in the terms that I'm discussing? That I would say no. He didn't understand it in that way, but he did understand that he did look at the reality of what his experience was and the reality of what black experience was. And so I would say that he contributed. He made a significant contribution at his time and at the point that he lived in history. You see, we can look across the board of all the people who were attempting to come to terms with what black people were experiencing and black people were suffering. And whether they saw the problem in the way that people who are now thinking a system of racism, white supremacy as a system for white genetic survival that cannot include the maximal development of the black genetic and constitutional potential because of the fear of white genetic annihilation. He didn't understand it in that way, but did he make a significant contribution? I would say yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're going to do a break, but I'm going to ask for your participation in it if it's permissible. Now, I don't know. Did you have a chance to look at the 2015 Black Seed calendar?
No, I haven't had a chance to look at all of it. I've had a calendar that was jam-packed with things that I had to take care of, but I appreciate it and I plan to put it up.
Okay. then I can't quite get my endorsement that I was shooting for. I was
no, but I'm sure
mhm.
that it's wonderful. I certainly appreciated receiving it, and I'm
Yeah.
certain that everybody else who receives one, purchases one, will find that it is very important, considering the source.
Yes, it is absolutely jam packed full of historical information. It goes back to the 60s. It comes up to where we are now. It profiles Malcolm. It profiles Martin. It deals with Chokwe Lumumba, who recently passed, the activist who became mayor in Louisiana. It's just jam packed full of information. This is a little more than a calendar. It is a historical magazine documenting us as a people. And for those of you who have Facebook, I have created a page called The Black Seed, recalling our own story, okay, or our story recall, okay. So if you have Facebook, go on that page, like that page, and order your magazine, order your calendar from The Legacy of a Nation, 1609 Cecil B. Moore Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19121. Take a look on my timeline and you can see the instructions on how to mail your self-addressed stamped envelope, a 9 by 11 envelope, to the 1609 address. Put your check or money order made out to The Legacy of a Nation for $8. If you just choose to order the calendar magazine, simply write to my email address, bsfp53 at yahoo.com. That's bsfp53 at yahoo.com. And I will send you the information on how and where to mail your check or money order, and we will send you the calendar. The calendar will be $11 if you do it that way. It's $8 if you send the self-addressed stamped envelope. And if you want to do fundraisers, please give me a call at 215-236-7410, and I will provide the calendars to you, but we will certainly work out our contractual deal. All right. So thank you for joining us. We have Dr. Frances Cress Welsing with us this morning, and we're going to ask her to go back over her definition of racism, white supremacy, but this time including the chess quest theory. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing?
Okay, my definition of racism, white supremacy, and if I could wave a magic wand, everybody would understand and use this definition so that we have absolute clarity and we make it clear to everybody that relates to black people that this is our understanding of racism, white supremacy. Racism, white supremacy is the local and global power system and dynamic, structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, by white-skinned people, and all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. So with that understanding, the whole idea that black and white people can all just blend together and everybody will be happy, that is not a reality, because if everybody blended together and everybody just loved each other and just wasn't focusing on skin coloration, because white skin is a genetic recessive state, the white people would disappear. And to the extent that people who classify themselves as white don't want to disappear as white, then they have to conduct the system of racism, white supremacy, which of necessity, white survival necessity, necessitates holding people of color, and especially black people who have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation, to hold them in oppression. So an important way of looking at the problem is thinking about a chessboard, where there's a white side of the chessboard and there's a black side of the chessboard. The game of chess is about white king, checkmate, black king. So in the game of chess, white always moves first. So white is moving offense, defense. The black side of the chessboard moves defense, offense. And I think it's an important way to envision the struggle that exists on planet Earth, has existed for the last 500 years. And again, I may not have emphasized, my discussion of racism, white supremacy is not for the purpose of black people hating white people. That it is for the purpose of understanding the power dynamics that exist on planet Earth in our time and for the past 500 years. And so when you sit down to play a game of chess, you don't spend time hating your opponent. You spend your time thinking about mastering and understanding of the game so that you move successfully from your side of the chessboard. And so I envision it's as though black people are on the black side of the chessboard and white people are on the white side. The people who classify themselves as white are on the white side of the chessboard. And so they are making their plays, and all of their plays are about white genetic survival by any means necessary. On the black side of the chessboard, the black side and black people have to counter the system of racism, white supremacy, because it is a system of injustice. And so from the black side of the chessboard, black people have to play countering racism and replacing the system of racism, white supremacy, which is a system of terror and injustice, and replacing it with a system of justice. Justice being defined by Neely Fuller in his work as no one is mistreated, no one is allowed to be mistreated, and those who need the most help get the most help. Mm-hmm. And so I just say that this is an excellent way of thinking about the work that is to be done by black people in relationship to the existing power system and dynamic of racism, white supremacy. We're all on the black side of the chessboard. And depending upon how well we begin to understand the dynamics of racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, in order to counter racism so as to produce justice. replacing racism, white supremacy with justice. So, let's say black people just marching around with a sign saying justice is not sufficient, that the denial of justice is related to the existence of a system of racism, white supremacy, and specific understanding of that system of racism, white supremacy, and understanding how best to counter it, not expecting that it's going to fade away on its own, or that people who classify themselves as white are going to give up their goal objective of white genetic survival on the planet by any means necessary. It's understanding all of that, but understanding the keys that black people have to engage in terms of perception, logic, thought, speech, action, and emotional response in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And if we take education, for example, black people can no longer think that black people are going to be maximally educated by the system dynamic of racism, white supremacy. So countering that, black people have to understand that the education of a black child begins before the sperm meets the egg, meaning that there's conscious understanding on the part of parents who engage in sexual activity and bring a child into the world, that the primary responsibility of educating that black child and teaching that child black self-respect, and that the black child is a value second to none, begins in the minds of the black male and the black female, the mother and father, hopefully the husband and wife, teaching that child that it has value and that it is going to be successful in understanding racism, white supremacy, and in countering it and enhancing black self-respect, black dignity, black pride, and black power, and knowing that black is beautiful. All of that is the educational work of the parents and the planned educational work before the child is even conceived.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Because that is the area that definitely has been talked about on the legacy of a nation. And we're talking about the raising of our children. Even before we bring them forth from the portal of life, meaning through the birth canal, we have to engage in raising our levels of consciousness, raising our levels of awareness. Now, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I'm going to open the phone line.
Can I say this, though, at this point?
Yes. Yes.
Let me say this, that, see, we have to, as black people, we have to be aware that black people who our ancestors were enslaved and brought from the African continent to the Americas, that we were not brought and enslaved for the purpose of maximal development. And if anything, we were enslaved for the purpose of working on plantations and producing other slaves and breeding and studying, and that's studying, producing offspring for the slave master to have more slaves or to sell to other plantations. That's what we were brought to do. And to the extent that we have not thought through sexual activity what I would call revolutionary sexual activity, then because slavery was a phase of the system of racism, white supremacy, then we are just going forward breeding and studying and producing children that we cannot take care of, and producing children because we're playing with sex and we don't have an understanding of racism, white supremacy. And so then the children are just taken through the inferiorization process that the system of racism, white supremacy has in mind. And so we have to do some very deep thinking. Sex is magnificent. Sex is the act that allows human beings to do what the creator of the universe can do, and that is to produce another human being. And so this is magnificent activity, but under the system of racism, white supremacy, it can become a degraded activity. And so when it does, it has to become activity that people begin to think very deeply about and take very seriously the idea of bringing a new life onto the planet when we are victims of a system of racism, white supremacy. So our goal should be bringing forth a black child who is going to be able to participate in countering a system of injustice, and so that the system of injustice of racism, white supremacy is eventually replaced with a system of justice. So that's a whole lot to think about before people engage in the act of sexual activity.
Absolutely.
Because if we're not mindful, then we will bring a child into the world and we ourselves will mistreat the child and devalue the child. And then the child will begin to wage war against black people. The child will not, if the child is not taken care of appropriately, the child will not learn to love and value him or herself, or learn to love and value other black people. And we will have people who indeed will hate themselves and hate black people, and will therefore indirectly be a supporter of the system of racism, white supremacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you find it permissible, I'm going to open the phone lines at this point. And the instructions for the listening audience, you have heard the line of questioning, you've heard the line of response. I want you to keep your questions clear and keep them one at a time. If you have a series of questions, you will get one, and then we'll go down the line to give everyone an opportunity to get in, or some of the people an opportunity to get in. You must press your 1 so that you'll come to the top of the screen, and I'll let you in. And when you've asked your 1 question, press your 1 again so that you'll drop down, and others who have their 1 will rise to the top. This is the way that I can handle this most fairly. Okay? So, with that, are you ready for the phone line, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the first question will come from 0373. 0373.
Yes, this is Kim in Chicago. How y'all doing? I'm honored to be here. I wanted to ask the sister elder about cycles of life activity, I guess. For those that have seen the Black Seed calendar, it says 50 years ago. And if you look at the pictures on the front of the calendar with the dog being attacked and the dog attacking the person, the marching, the signs, 50 years ago we were doing the same thing that we're doing today. And not just what we're doing, but the system of racism, white supremacy is doing to us the same things they were doing 50 years ago today. So the experiment of integration has failed. Is there a knowledge, I guess to say, of cycles of history? You know how they say if you don't learn your history, you'll repeat it. But for us right now in this time span, it's been 50 years, and we're back where we were in 1964. Are there cycles of history we can learn about where if we do something different this time, then we won't have to repeat this again in the next 50 years? So I guess I'm talking about the cycles of 50-50 or whatever. Does that make sense? Is there a cycle if we don't do what we're supposed to do? And that's my question.
Yes, it's a good question, and I think I understand. What I would say is that 50 years ago, when black people thought that integration was a possibility, or some people might call it integration, or they call it equality. And I would say that at that point, there was not an understanding that we were dealing with a total system and what that system was actually about. I would dare say that the vast majority of people on the planet, the people of color on the planet, are not thinking that racism, all of them are victims in one way or another of the system of racism, white supremacy. But they are not thinking that the system is about white genetic survival by any necessary means. And so I would say, like the people, black people here in this area of the world, we did not understand 50 years ago that we were dealing with a system for white genetic survival. We thought we were dealing with a system of democracy, and there were some imperfections in the democracy, and that if the laws were changed, then all of this would change, all of the things that black people were experiencing. So what looks like a cycle, just going in cycles of history, I would say that we have cycles of understanding. And so let's say in cycle 1, we understood at a certain level. Cycle 2, we thought it was something else. Cycle 3, in other words, if we are looking critically, I would say that every black person should be saying, okay, well, we marched 50 years ago. Why are we still having to march today, 5 decades later? And asking that question seriously and saying, well, we may have to analyze the problem at a deeper level. Maybe we didn't understand the problem as fully as we needed to understand it. We don't have to blame ourselves because we didn't understand fully at point A. But if you continue to see the same problem, you don't just keep doing the same thing. You have to say, what is it that we did not understand about the problem that we are dealing with, so that we can enhance our understanding, because we are intent on solving the problem with all deliberate speed. I don't know if that answers the question.
That hit the question precisely. I have to ask the people to please email me to The Legacy of a Nation. That's TheLegacyofANation @yahoo.com, and respond, because I will ask Dr. Frances Cress Welsing to be with us again at some future date and time when it fits her schedule. Let us go to the next person online, 3105. Make sure you keep your one question nice and clear. 3105?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm honored to be here. It's a great show for a Saturday morning. My question is, I for the last 4 years have been giving Christmas gifts, the ISIS papers, out to just friends, family, coworkers, and one of the things that I have been getting from people who have read the book, they really have said that the book changed their lives. I mean, dramatically changed their lives. And so in terms of a solution, it seems that a lot of people that I've dealt with, we have study groups and we talk about the book, and they still are confused about a solution. And one of the ideas was a massive united front. And I just would like to see if Dr. Frances could talk about why it's so hard for us to unite. And it just seems like with all of the different things going on, why is it so hard for us to unite when that's the number one thing I think we need to do as a people? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, good question. I would say that it's hard for us to unite because we are being 24/7 programmed by racism, white supremacy in the form of television. I mean, we're not aware. Neely Fuller says if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and exactly how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. And so the system, I tell people, when you turn on the television in the morning and you think you're getting the news and the weather report, you are simultaneously, just because it's white images, one after the other, continuous white imaging, and it is teaching racism, white supremacy. And so because there is no equal black presence, then we are really learning black doesn't count, black doesn't count, black doesn't count. Children are learning black doesn't count. If black counted, we would see black images, and not clowning and buffooning black images, but serious, intelligent black images. So we are continuously being programmed against our interest, and to the extent that we don't understand system structure of racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, we are being taught black self-hatred. We could spend time talking about black image defamation, and if somebody just looked at the series in which black people are represented, do those images represent seriousness, dignity, self-respect, group respect? I would dare say no. And so we have to begin to understand that the system is constantly programming us for its benefit. It's only when we begin to understand exactly what the system is and decide that we are going to counter the system. I mean, you have many, many black people who say, I don't want to talk about racism. That's old school. We can all just get along. Then the people do not understand racism. If they don't understand racism, they don't know how they are being systematically programmed against themselves. And so, therefore, unity cannot take place. You can't unify. If I don't like myself, I can't unify with people who look like me. And so we, again, are not aware of how systematically we are being programmed to dislike ourselves. Black people feel they're being entertained using the word nigger and bitch and hoe and gangster and thug. People are dancing and moving and shaking themselves and thinking this is fun. No, this is psychological warfare that the system pays multiple millions of dollars to so-called artists who will talk in this manner because it is putting ideas in the mind at a subconscious level to devalue yourself and to devalue one another, and really to enhance black genocide. I mean, to the extent that black men and women are calling each other names and demeaning and degrading sex, that's genocide. And so if we don't understand what the system of racism is all about and how it is impacting our existence 24/7, it's only when we begin to understand what the system is, and so each individual person can be in a position to counter. And I'm not talking about spending any time hating white people. No, it's effectively playing the black side of the chessboard when the white side of the chessboard is playing racism, white supremacy, white genetic survival by any means necessary. The black side of the chessboard can then begin to play counter racism. And so if we spend a lot of time in the coming days and weeks understanding that small bits of behavior can begin to counter racism. And Neely Fuller, in his work, Textbook for Victims of Racism, which everybody should have at least 5 copies of, he talks about small behaviors that are very powerfully significant if people practice those behaviors just as individuals and by individual choice, united independent choice. They begin to counter the system. And some of those behaviors are stop name-calling one another, stop gossiping about one another, stop squabbling with one another, stop cursing one another, stop being discourteous and disrespectful to one another, stop stealing from one another, stop robbing one another, stop fighting one another, and stop killing one another. Can you just imagine if black people, just as individuals, are thinking about what can I do about the system of racism, white supremacy? Oh, I'm going to select 1 or 2 of the behaviors recommended in the work of Neely Fuller, Jr. I'm going to select what I'm going to be practicing in the next few weeks. I'm going to not squabble. I'm not going to be discourteous or disrespectful to another black person. And just imagine if we were talking to each other and talking to our children about countering racism, and so we don't fight each other and we don't kill each other. Now, I've added to that list, stop using and selling drugs to one another. Stop black children from thinking that as children they can be adequate mothers and fathers. Stop throwing down trash where black people live, work, and play. Stop pretending that racism, white supremacy does not exist. And stop allowing racism, white supremacy to divide black, brown, red, and yellow people. Do you see? So those behaviors people can select. You know, I say every black person should get a PhD in broom studies, meaning we don't throw trash. We don't throw chicken bones. I got out of my car a week ago, and, somebody had thrown some chicken bones in the street. These are behaviors that we don't engage in because we value and respect ourselves as black people, and our behavior in relationship to ourselves and one another is going to reflect that we respect ourselves. And I say that there's no more powerful weapon than self-respect. And if black people begin to focus in this way and say we are going to understand exactly and precisely what racism and white supremacy is, and we are going to use our understanding and our self-respect in countering this most terroristic, this most unjust system of behavior that exists on planet Earth.
Okay, thank you. And again, keep your questions crisp, sharp, and one at a time. When you have finished your question, press your one again so that you drop to the bottom of the screen so that I can ensure in getting most callers in. Let us go to the next caller. Caller 5715.
Peace and blessings, Brother Ramisous, and peace and blessings, Queen. This is an honor, as always, to speak to you. And my question would be, this is Professor Carl Tone Jones from Philadelphia. And my question would be, how do we address those brothers and sisters who claim allegiances to organizations over the race when it comes to dealing with our current predicament? Because I'm pretty sure you're aware of the fraternities and sororities where they're not allowing brothers and sisters to wear their colors in protests that are going on throughout the country. And I'm pretty sure you're aware of brothers and sisters who happen to be police officers and members of other organizations who have claimed allegiance to those organizations rather than claiming allegiance to the race.
Well, I would say basically that it's just black people who do not understand yet the system of racism, white supremacy. In other words, we are all victims of the system of racism, white supremacy. The system itself attempts very vigorously to prevent black people from talking about racism as white supremacy and discussing it and in deepening our understanding. And so there are many, many people who do not understand racism, white supremacy, or there are many, many people who do not want to even talk about racism, white supremacy. But I run into people all the time who say, you know, I first heard you 20 years ago, and I knew you were crazy. But now I understand what you're talking about. I had a colleague in psychiatry say to me last year at a medical convention, Dr. Welsing, you have been talking to us for 40 years about racism. I'm finally beginning to understand. This is a colleague in psychiatry. I'm finally beginning to understand what you're talking about. So the fact that there are people who do not understand, that is to be expected. People understand at different rates in different ways relative to what their exact experience is. And so I wouldn't worry as much about the people who don't understand at a given point as those people who do understand persisting in going forward, not banging another black person over the head. If a black person says, look, I don't want to talk about racism, just say fine and move on to the next person who might, like the church says, whosoever will, let him or her come. And so it's okay. I've decided if I have to do it all by myself, I'm going to do it. You know, if nobody else comes along, I'm going to do the best that I can. And so it's just important if somebody doesn't understand racism, doesn't want to talk about it, swears allegiance to something other. You see, because within the programming of the system of racism, white supremacy, there is the illusion of inclusion. There's the fantasy of wanting to believe that we are included. The marches that just took place, that were flooded in many situations with people who classify themselves as white. Many black people were more impressed that it was so many white people with black people that this gave credence to what black people were talking about without even questioning whether those white people were actually interested in eliminating the system of racism, white supremacy. And I would dare say 99% of them were not. But just the fact that there were white people with black people, that was the most important thing in some people's mind, even though the idea about the march was really being taken in another direction altogether. So I hope that that shed some light on what I feel about. If everybody just decide, if nobody else wants to do anything about racism, white supremacy, just decide as a person that you're not going to engage in the denial and that you're going to maybe just practice not gossiping or you're going to practice not being discourteous. That will have a major energy vibrational impact on the system. Just be willing to persist over time.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that answer. People, please remember, keep your questions clear, precise, one at a time, and press your 1 when you have finished so others have an opportunity to rise to the top of the screen. And I'm only going to call on the numbers that people have pressed their 1 in order not to go into silence, as the program is now moving really quickly. 8547.
Great things to Brother Ramisous and Nana Chopra and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. This is Brother Ramisous in New Orleans, or Devin to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? And it's a pleasure to be on your show with the Legacy of the Nation. One thing, we were able here in New Orleans today to get Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's definition into today's black newspaper. So we're real happy about that. My question is, with regards to behavior, can you explain, you talked about it previous caller prior to the last caller, but can you explain again the importance of impeccable behavior and specifically give us an analysis of what it means to be behaved well under to counter the system of racism, white supremacy, and being serious at the workplace? And I'll take my answer off there. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to talk about. I would just say that impeccable behavior, I used that term some time ago, and the caller latched on it and has really used it in countering racism. But impeccable behavior, we can just say this is counter-racist behavior. It's awareness. It starts with the awareness that there is a system of racism, white supremacy, and there's no black person that can say racism doesn't impact me. Racism impacts all of us regardless as to income level. You can be a multimillionaire like Oprah Winfrey, and when she attempts to go into an exclusive boutique, somebody, decides that they're not going to open the door because she is a black person, and they don't want black people, a black person, in their boutique. But impeccable behavior means that the black person is deciding that they are going to first and foremost have deep respect for themselves. And respect is not just saying I respect myself. Respect for self is reflected in the respect that you show towards other people. And all of this, again, is within the context of understanding that we are dealing with a system of racism, white supremacy. Every single thing that happens to black people is a direct or indirect result of the system of racism, and we cannot escape it. There's no place on the planet that you can go. There's no place that you can go in outer space that you're going to get away from racism. Racism requires that you confront it for what it is, and the utilization of one's self-respect and knowledge of what is going on around you, us as a people, and deciding I'm going to learn as much as I can possibly learn about the system of racism, white supremacy that has been operative for 500 years. I'm going to learn to value myself second to none and counter this force. You see, the ultimate intention, when a group of people are fearful of another group being able to cause their genetic annihilation, the ultimate logic is to genocide that group of people. And so this is what we as black people have to be struggling against. In many ways, we are already on a genocide slide. If you destroy the men of a people, then you are consigning those people to genocide. And so we have to recognize that and to decide to shape and mold our behavior in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Organize our behavior that reflects the respect that we have for ourselves, or that each individual has for him or herself in countering racism. So I would call that impeccable behavior in a system of racism, white supremacy, when the victims are deciding to use their self-respect and their behavior to counter the system. The system of racism, white supremacy operates in economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. It operates in all of those areas of activity, and countering it in all areas of activity is the work of black people who are intent on replacing racism, white supremacy with justice.
All right. Thank you. And we're getting ready to open up the next line. But before I do, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, this is not a question, and please don't respond to this particular statement, okay? It has been my greatest desire to bring Dr. Frances Cress Welsing to Philadelphia. She has been here in past years. But it is my greatest aspiration to bring her to Philadelphia for two reasons. One, to honor her at a dinner for the work that she has done over the past years. Because whether other people have or they haven't, this would be an opportunity of our lifetime to extend that greatest honor, that greatest position of respect for the work that has been done and laid out for us as a race. The blueprint that we could use to get to the promised land. Talking around that Bible because I know a lot of us are caught in it, but we need to be caught completely comprehending it. So, people who are listening to The Legacy of a Nation, this is a group project. Help bring this to a reality. All right, thank you for listening. Let's go to the next phone call. 2865. 2865.
Greetings, Dr. Welsing. I have a question. I'm working on a second master's, and I'm in the legal field. And I find myself, when we're doing group projects, I'm running up against a lot of backlash. A lot of people want to apply that colorblind theory, but I'm a stark nationalist, black nationalist, and I understand white supremacy, and I don't compromise. How should I address that? What are some pointers that you can give me where I can be tactful? I find myself not so tactful when I'm addressing certain issues that pertains to us.
Well, let me respond in this way, that I can understand not always being tactful, or maybe being excited, or maybe being upset when people do not want to even think about racism, white supremacy. The most important thing that you can do is to know there's a reason for the opposition to understanding it. I don't know whether you're talking about people who classify themselves as white, or whether you're talking about people of color. But if people who classify themselves as white, they do not want to focus on racism, white supremacy. That's been my experience. Even the most liberal don't really want to focus on racism, white supremacy when it gets into a close examination of white collective and white individual behavior. So if you expect that, if you expect to run into that and decide that you are going to practice being as calm and as possible in stating what you understand and what you believe to be the case. And sometimes I've said to students who are in school, if they say, well, I'm working on my master's degree, or I'm working on giving a paper, and I want to use your understanding of racism, white supremacy. And sometimes I've said, ask the instructor, is it all right if you were to write from that particular point of view? And if the instructor says, no, your dissertation will not be accepted if you write from this point of view, I advise the student to say, fine, I will have to do that on my own. That if their goal is to get a credential, then you get your credential, and then you can have a degree of more freedom to write about what you think, and to write books and to write articles from your vantage point. But don't necessarily anticipate that it is going to be accepted. I heard a white lawyer say, in relationship to talking about racism and the law, this person said that there is justice and there is the law, and the two are not necessarily the same thing. You see, in a system of racism, white supremacy, the law moves in the direction of supporting the system. The laws are structured, the language is structured so as to be able to be manipulated to support the system of racism, white supremacy, not to support its undoing. And so that's laws being structured to support the system of racism, white supremacy. Justice is something else. And so this may be the contradiction that you are experiencing, but I would say just be knowledgeable about this. In a system of racism, white supremacy, the laws are going to support the system of racism, white supremacy. And if you are in the position to counter that pattern of thinking and that pattern of logic, then you can speak to it, but anticipate that it's going to be there. It's just like if you're at the chessboard, any move you make on the black side, anticipate that it's going to be countered on the white side, but that the fact that it is countered doesn't mean that you stop.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Listeners, please maintain your positions on the line, because if you disconnect and reconnect, I can't tell that you're there. There are many people who have been patient and holding the line, and I am going to answer the calls that have the most time on their counter. So remember, please press your 1 once you have asked your question, and if you want a question, you must press your 1 in order to be recognized. This is going to bring you to the top of the screen so that I can see you and open the microphone for your question. Let us take the next caller. Please keep your question clear and to the point, and your comments short, because I know some of you just have to make a comment. So, 3364.
Hey, good morning, my brother and Dr. Frances.
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am. Could you expound on this old trick they playing on us by going after our brother, Dr. William H. Cosby? Because from my perspective, he was getting ready to buy NBC again, try to buy him, and he was talking about black people elevate ourselves, i.e. by taking the model of the Nation of Islam and clean up ourselves. Could you respond to the listeners and the callers how they trying to trick us again with this thing on Bill Cosby with the white women coming at him, please?
Can I have you repeat the question, and the host repeat the question, because I didn't hear it too clearly?
Okay, 3364, take your time, speak
No,
slowly.
repeat it, because it may be the connection, I don't know.
Okay,
yes,
I need them to repeat it for me.
Yeah, I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia, but my question is, if y'all can hear me, can you expound on this old white artificial intelligence, how they trying to go after our brother, Dr. William H. Cosby, because he was talking about elevating ourselves, and he was trying to buy NBC again, and he was telling us to model after the Nation of Islam. So can you respond about to this trick that they trying to do on Dr. Cosby by having us go at him, by sending the white women at him now?
All right.
See, I still need to have it repeated. I didn't understand.
Right. His question is about white artificial intelligence going after black leaders who raise the level of our people through Islam. He's going through a religion, and he says that they are attacking them by sending white women after them.
Now, is the caller referring to Bill Cosby?
Let me make sure that is the case. Are you referring to Bill Cosby? Yes.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Bill Cosby. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Well, let me say this, that in the system of racism, white supremacy, people are programmed, black people are programmed to admire white over black. That's males and females. This is the programming within the system of racism, white supremacy. And so Bill Cosby, being a victim, like we are all victims of racism, white supremacy, it appears to me that if the accusations made against him are true, we don't know whether they are, but if the accusations are true or partially true, then as a victim, he was vulnerable to programming that, I must have a white partner. I must be involved with a white person, maybe to give myself validation. And so that can be used as, within the system framework, that can be used as a trap. I remember many years ago in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, seeing this when I was a teenager in Chicago, and there was a cartoon, sort of a quasi-cartoon, and it had the traps that black people could fall into, or that black men could fall into. And so in one bottle, like one medicine bottle, it had drugs. In a second medicine bottle, it had alcohol. And in the third medicine bottle was a curled-up white female. So, yes, that can be a trap relative to the programming that black people have received within the system of racism and white supremacy.
All right. One of our callers has dropped off. They were in a position. I'm going to take one of the callers that are associated with them and ask them, can they present a question that they thought their caller might have had. 9302. I know your one is not depressed, but the other caller, your associate, has dropped off. Could you position a question that they may have intended? 9302. Okay. They may be on another line. 9302, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I just received a call from California. They were dropped off of the phone, and she wanted me to ask. She is working with a political figure in the small town of Richmond, and she works with multicultural, multi-everything people. But she wants this woman to become a little more enlightened about global white supremacy, the system. And I believe California is on the line, so she'll be able to hear the answer. Is there a way that she could speak with you, Dr. Welsing, or have a meeting or something? Because the woman that called in said that she works with these people and say, aren't they just wonderful? But she's seeing something else totally different. Thank you for listening.
Okay, now I didn't hear that last part. What was said?
See, what happens is there's a woman from Richmond, California, who works with a multicultural group. And
now, does this mean a black woman in California works with other racial groups?
Answer yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they were wondering if they could make contact with you and have instructions basically on how to work together and how to make progress in the areas in which they are moving.
Well, I would say that if the issue is about race and relating as race, I would start with what the Attorney General said, are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? And just say, well, this is what the Attorney General of the United States has laid out. Are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? And so it's important that everybody try to get the courage so that they can talk about racism. And then the person might say, well, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has a definition of racism, white supremacy, and we might look at that as a point to start. But there is racism, white supremacy. It is a reality, and to try to have as calm as possible a discussion. I would not anticipate that there would be agreement in the beginning or at the end of many, many discussions, but at least to lay out. I think that we have used the word racism billions of times, but not following it with a precise definition of what we're talking about. Now, somebody might have another definition of racism as white supremacy, but at least if a discussion begins by saying, this is what my understanding of racism, white supremacy is, this is what I'm talking about, this is why it exists, and then all they have to do is cite whatever behaviors or issues come up that are connected to racism. I would almost guarantee that they would fit within the framework of the definition, just like the necessity to kill black men which is what we're seeing in Ferguson, Missouri, in Staten Island, New York, and Cleveland, Ohio. If there's going to be white genetic survival, then consciously and or subconsciously the black male appears as the enemy of the state and the number one target to be attacked. And I'm the only Welsing in the D.C. phone book. So my number is there, and the person, if they wanted to contact me further, they can do so.
Okay. A little bit more on their particular interests. The Legacy of a Nation is covering targeted individuals. Targeted individuals generate from covert operations of electronic harassment and other areas of really making people feel that they're insane. The harassment that these people are receiving from the systems of people who are working within the government of America. They're wondering, do you have experience? I don't want to use the word intelligence twice. Do you have experience in those areas, and could you help them comprehend what is happening to them?
No, I'm not able to comment effectively about that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Let us continue. We have Professor Jones up at the top of the list. So, Professor Jones, your next question.
You caught me off guard, Brother Ramisous.
Oh, no.
I always have questions. I always have questions. With the movement now, and I heard what Dr. Welsing said about how enamored we become with the illusion of inclusion. What's happening now with the movement? Is it being co-opted, and is that energy being redirected? Because I see that, the white power structure that we're dealing with, they're always like thinking 15, 20 moves ahead, or 50, 100 years ahead. So do you think they anticipated what's happening now, and are they redirecting the energy that's being utilized now by our youth who are angry about police brutality, things of that nature, they being an oppressive state and so forth? And are they misdirecting that so that we will become frustrated? I mean, I just would like to know what your opinion is about what's happening with the movement, and is it really being co-opted?
Well, I would say, to go back to an analogy, that, in other words, at the chessboard, the white king attempts to checkmate the black king. And so all of the moves on the chessboard, the offensive and defensive moves, are to achieve the goal objective that the white side of the chessboard has in mind. And so, since we have a system of racism, white supremacy, the people who classify themselves as white consciously, subconsciously know what they're doing, which is why a tiny minority of the people on the planet can control the majority, because they understand what their survival necessity is. And to the extent that on the black side of the chessboard there is not an understanding. See, I think the black side of the chessboard is by and large operating on the Rodney King philosophy, can't we all just get along? Now, that would be ideal, but that is not, if the white side of the chessboard is playing white genetic survival by any means necessary, the black side of the chessboard cannot successfully play, can't we all just get along? It's just like you can't take a tennis racket on the football field and expect to be successful. So the white side of the chessboard, if the black people start out complaining about black men being killed by white police officers, that being the complaint, that is essential under the system of racism, white supremacy. So if the black people's message of being against racism, white supremacy, if that message is changed and it serves, in other words, on the white side of the chessboard, they prefer that black people not focus on racism, that they focus on another word, justice. Well, the problem of black people not having justice is because of racism, white supremacy. If the white side of the chessboard wants to deflect and get black people away from focusing on racism, then they will give them a large, well-made sign that says something about justice. And so I would say that if black people really understood and had in-depth understanding about our problem as a system of racism, white supremacy, then they would say to people who classify themselves as white, if you want to solve the problem that we understand is racism, white supremacy, then you will do the following. You will, if you say as a white person you're not racist, then you will stop the white people who are, because we are all in agreement that there is a system of racism, white supremacy. So that will be the work for white people. As black people continue to focus from the black vantage point and the black experience, they proceed to move countering racism as they understand it. But they can be deflected. In other words, I would say that the majority of black people at this particular point in time, their goal objective, consciously and or subconsciously, is to be in the embrace of people who classify themselves as white. That's what the religion that black people have been given under white supremacy is all about, that there's going to be a white savior who is going to love and embrace black people, all people regardless as to color. I believe that consciously, subconsciously, that's the dominant mentality. And until black people do the internal and the external analysis of system of racism, white supremacy, and the internal analysis as to how that has impacted us, we will still be in that frame as opposed to having absolute clarity about a system of racism, white supremacy, and what black people alone must do. See, if black people are respecting themselves, they're not saying, I need to have this other group with me in order for me to get my point across and in order for me to be effective. No other group is doing that. Hispanics are not saying they need black people, and without black people, they can't get their point across. White women are not saying we can't get our point across unless we have black people with us. No other group is put in the position of saying and thinking without a lot of other people. And I say that the position of black countering racism and black self-respect is no, we as black people have a particular problem, and we have to focus on our particular problem, and we have to insist that the president, be he black or white or green or purple, understand what our problem is as black people, and then we pursue and persist that this is our problem, not some nebulous problem, not some nebulous statement about justice when it's undefined, but no, having a specific understanding. Our problem is a system of racism, white supremacy, and this is what our analysis and our definition of what racism, white supremacy is all about, and this is what we as black people are opposing and countering and not being pulled off of that horse.
All right, thank you. And let us go to 0373. But just before you begin, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I have to remind you that we have been the 2 hours and just over 15 minutes. It's 42 minutes left in the program. Do you have time to continue?
Yes, we can go forward.
All right,
we can go forward, right.
Thank you. 0373. 0373.
Yes, this is Kim in Chicago again. My question is kind of getting back to what Brother Ramisous mentioned about, quote, unquote, the interview movie and how North Korea stepped in and said, you know, if you put this movie out, this is what's going to happen. The system of racism, white supremacy, cloak their actions or their methods. Well, I shouldn't say methods, but their actions and their ideas and the things that they want to do to people. They cloak that in entertainment, you know, be it comedy, music, movies, and that kind of thing. How can we start to educate our people to let them know that? I don't know if you said this, Sister Elder, but there's no such thing as entertainment. It's all for the for the genetic annihilation, to make sure they don't get genetically annihilated. But how can we share with our people, I know you have in the book about the sports and everything, but, our people think it's just entertainment. So what can we say to them to let them know that these things are not entertainment?
Well, the African proverb, each one teach one. Black people, I often say, in giving a lecture, that if I taught a new dance step, and I said, to the black people in the group, this is the latest dance step, nobody would say, how do we get that dance step taught from Washington, D.C. to California? See, in other words, black people, because dancing is important, singing is important, black people put their arms around each other and make sure everybody masters the latest dance step or masters the latest joke. And so it's the intention. What is the intention? And there's an African proverb, each one teach one. Do you see? And so if we take that approach in helping people who may not understand how movies and other forms of so-called entertainment are used to convey certain ideas, like the movie Scandal or the series Scandal is being used portraying black females in certain images that are not any different than how black women were used on the slave plantation. But if people don't have an understanding of racism, white supremacy, and what its goal objectives are, then they won't necessarily see it. But somebody might help them with patience and gentleness and help them understand what the system is and how this particular series, or how the black sorority series where black females are showing themselves at a disadvantage. They think they're just being paid to be stars or television stars or entertainment stars, but their behavior is saying to white people, look at these subhumans. See, we don't understand, and it would be important for people to read about Nazi Germany, because Adolf Hitler knew how to use the propaganda by images in magazines and in movies. They didn't have television, but they had magazines and movies and books to portray negative images of the people that they planned to genocide and to destroy. See, black people need help in understanding. Black people in some of these commercials, a black man jumping up and down in a store and acting stupid. There are many commercials where black people are bouncing around and, looking like they don't know how to stand still. All of these are significant kinds of imaging. Like they say, one picture is worth 1,000 words. And so for those people who understand, help people who do not understand, help them to try to understand. But if they don't want to, if they don't want to pay attention, leave it alone. Don't squabble. Black people don't squabble with each other. But try to help somebody understand. They say, I'm not interested, then leave it alone. At some other point, they might be interested.
All right. Thank you. Let us go to 7940. Make sure you speak slowly and clearly. 7940.
Yes. Greetings, Dr. Frances.
Greetings. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am Amy Anderson, and I'm from Richmond. I'm the target individual, and I understand you do not can speak on that specific topic. However, I do know that the angle I'm going, based upon what you have educated us with, what is white supremacy, and I really appreciate that. But my question to you is, can you put something together, like you were saying, speaking to us what we should not do? Because I would like to use that as a curriculum for the city of this city official that I'm working with. I built up a relationship with this African sister, and she is consciously culture about her culture, and she has proven that to me. The thing is that how when I say people, we think we can. It's a diverse thing when it's really not. That's just a hidden plan to deceive us. So what I wanted to do, if I can get something from you that I know that will break this system down. Basically, when you said, if I feel the same way as you feel. If they won't do it, our people won't do it, then I'll just have to do it myself. So what I'm doing is to help neutralize me being a targeted individual, I must put a curriculum in place that will neutralize what is happening to me. And to do that, I want to, like you say, don't trash your community. All the don'ts you were just naming. I would like that format so I can use that as a guideline curriculum for change in my community based upon the support I have in my community.
Okay. Well, see, I encourage people to have confidence in themselves. In other words, clearly, you have a lot of ideas about what needs to be done, and believe in yourself and have confidence. Well, I'm going to share, I'm going to develop these ideas. I'm going to share these ideas with the people that are in my community, or the people that I want to work with. And I say every black person has to see him or herself as a leader. It's not one person or two people who are the leaders. Every person needs to say, I am a leader, and therefore I have to understand what our problem as a collective is. And I'm going to use my intelligence and my creativity to help impact the lives of other people against the problem that we have with racism, white supremacy. As I said earlier, I used to say every black person should get a PhD in broom studies. See, if black people decided for the next 5 years it's not going to be any trash, any broken glass, any bottles on the street in the areas where black people live. If black people just said that one thing, is going to be no trash on the street, and everybody did their part in broom studies, it would have a profound effect on the way that black people think about themselves. It's just like, there's some neighborhoods that you can go in and you don't expect to see any trash or any paper or any bottles in the gutter. Oh wow, look, that would be something that would be so unusual it would be the basis of comedy. But coming to an area where we as black people are, and the expectation is that the gutters are supposed to be clean and there's supposed to be trash all around, trash around the stores, trash around the houses. Well, black people, by just focusing on that, or a small group of black people in a community talking about that, could have a profound impact on countering racism, because it would be countering the system of racism's attempt to demean black people, and black people countering the attempt to demean and to degrade with their positive images about themselves as black people. And so therefore their surrounding environment looks in a particular way versus another way.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask, because the clock is really, really moving fast. When we come and visit you in Washington, you often share the story about you being on a particular television show, and a commercial comes and you touch a particular person and ask them a question. Would you share that with us at this point?
I think you're talking about, I mentioned that I was on a television program in California some years ago, and it was when President Reagan's son had his television show.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic of the show was racism, and it was a large panel of people, different colors, different groups. And I was seated next to Tom Metzger, who is with one of the major white supremacy, white separatist groups. And during the commercial break, he was seated next to me, and I just turned to him and I said, Mr. Metzger, tell me something. What percentage, and he's an arch white supremacist, white separatist. I touched him on his arm to get his attention, and he didn't say, don't touch me, nigger. He was really very polite. And I said, Mr. Metzger, tell me something. What percentage of people who classify themselves as white are fearful of white genetic annihilation? And he said, Dr. Welsing, nearly all of them. But they are afraid or ashamed to admit it. And I said, that's precisely what I thought. In other words, the understanding on his part that this is indeed what people who classify themselves as white are fundamentally concerned about. So no matter how they come off as hating black people, and this and that and the other, the important thing is that black people have not, until now, had a sufficient level of understanding of what people who classify themselves as white and what their fundamental motivation is. And so you can't deal with people based on what you think they ought to be thinking. You have to relate to them as a matter of respect. What is it that they are actually thinking? And black people have wanted white people to love and embrace them just like the white image of God. Black people want that, to love and embrace them. But people who classify themselves as white have a fundamental problem of their own on this particular planet. And that is what they address in terms of their behavior towards black people. And it's not a matter of telling white people to think about something other than their genetic survival on the planet. That black people have to, this is what you think. Well, finally, we are beginning to understand. We didn't understand that before. Now we are understanding it. And so then black people's position in relationship to white people, but what you feel you have to do to people of color on the planet makes for a very unjust situation. And so then we as people of color, we as black people in this area of the world have to oppose it. And we're not going to oppose it with hatred, but we're going to oppose it with our own self-respect, which has been annihilated by the 500-year process of racism and white supremacy. But we are going to restructure our self-respect. And we have to oppose you because we are going to replace an unjust system with a system of justice so there can be peace on the planet.
Absolutely. Oh, boy. I really want to thank you. We still have a couple of minutes. I'm going to open the line back up for New Orleans in just a second. But, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here on the Legacy of a Nation. We are a network of giving us a voice. And we recognize, what we have to work through in order to do it. And to keep the violations down against talking about ourselves, not airing our dirty laundry in public. Why should we get on air talking about those who have been positioned in leadership and what they're not doing? Why don't we organize behind closed doors as they do when they iron out their differences? This is just a statement. So let me open the line for our caller, 3105, and state your next question.
Yes. My question is, well, it's really not a question. It's more of a statement. I have a youth group called Brothers by Nature, and it's a continued group that I had grown up in upstate New York, Ithaca, New York, and we're starting to put chapters all over the United States. Right now, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're opening up a new chapter here. And we're really going to use the curriculum of the ISIS paper, some of Neely Fuller's work, a combination of a lot of the activists out there. And I guess the biggest thing is, Dr. Cress was saying, Dr. Welsing was saying, we have to have that confidence. For maybe 15 years, all of the brothers who worked in the group Brothers by Nature was afraid to go and educate our young people, our young boys especially. And we all decided after Mike Brown was murdered that we were absolutely going to go out and do this mission. And what I want to say is now it's turned into sisters by nature, mothers by nature, fathers by nature. And the program is about cultural awareness, fighting against white supremacy, the system of white supremacy and racism. And I just want Dr. Cress, Dr. Welsing, to know that we hear you. And this 300 young kids are going to be affected by your teaching. And it's absolutely a must that we need to do something to recognize your work. But I know that the best way we can do it is by educating our youth in the manner of knowledge that we get from you and many others like you. So I love you, we love you, and we're hearing you, and keep fighting because we're fighting with you. Thank you.
Well, I thank you very much, and I deeply, deeply, deeply commend you and the other people who are working with you. I am continually, it's at certain points we can look around, and because there's so much work to be done, we can be discouraged. But at the same time, it's like I look around and different people in different places are doing some wonderful things, and black people have the intelligence and the genius to solve this problem. If we can begin to see clearly what the problem is, we have all of the necessary intelligence and genius and creativity within our population to solve these problems on the planet. And so I commend you, I commend Ramisous, the people who have different shows, communication vehicles to put out relevant discussion and messages that I just commend you. I commend you for what it is that you're doing, and we all just need to renew our confidence that we can succeed, and we have to remind ourselves that the creative force in the universe made black people the mothers and fathers of everybody on the planet. Do you see, we're the first people, we're the mothers and fathers of everybody, including the white people who are mutations from black. And so our responsibility as the parents of the planet is to not only save the planet, develop the planet, and to solve these problems that the planet is facing.
Absolutely. Again, I want to thank you for being with us this morning. We certainly appreciate it, and we look forward to you being with us again per your schedule allowing it. One of the pieces that you just went over is a program within itself, and that is our God state of mind, our Creator. The images in the text, in the Bible, we have one group of people saying, well, image doesn't matter. We have another group of people saying that there is no image, and yet the system of racism, white supremacy, meaning Michelangelo and his brothers, his cousins and everyone else, meaning King James, took the time to change the African images that were in the text to the Caucasian images that we saw. And I have to use the time the 1950s and forward because I can't go back, much further than that. They changed the images to white. Now, it is not only here in America, but primarily here in America, and then over into Africa after the missionaries went over and were toting the Bible and the gun, and they left the Africans with the Bible, no guns, no land, no resources. So that is like an entire program within itself. And primarily, the last question, is this why the African population can move no further against the system of racism, white supremacy, is because they have a white God state of mind, or is that just too bold of a statement to make?
Well, I would say that applies to all people of color, and certainly we can speak of our own group. If my concept of God is the same concept of the same image as my oppressor, I am in serious trouble. And this is why black people who could have come up with a musical, Arms Too Short to Box with God. Mm-hmm. That means, that black is inadequate to take on white, or to oppose white, or oppose racism, white supremacy. So image is extremely important. That's why when black people would prefer to be white and not black, that's the impact. Image. And image as taught, acceptable image as taught in the system of racism, white supremacy. So we can't say that image doesn't matter. No, the very fact, as you stated, that the people who created the religious ideologies on the continent of Africa, those were black people. They might have been different shades of black people, but those were black people that those religious thoughts came from. And the very fact that a group of people decided we are going to change the color of these black images and make them white. I think there's some major movie that's out. Is it Exodus?
Yes.
Do you see that is reinforcing that these were white people and not black people that these religious philosophies and ideas came from. And so all of it is part and parcel of system of racism, white supremacy in programming the people of color, programming black people to be in awe of white and to reject black. But we are, I say that the reparations that we need are the reparations and the repairing that we do of ourselves. This is more important than if the system of racism, white supremacy gave every black person who is a descendant of an enslaved person $1 trillion apiece. If we did not change our understanding and images of ourselves, concepts of ourselves as black people, all those multiple trillions of dollars would be back in the hands of white people within a week.
Nothing flat. You're right.
You see, but the transformation of our concept and image of ourselves and deciding that we are going to value and love ourselves second to none, and that we intend to hold these concepts and images of ourselves for the next 20 million years, then that is the most power. That is more powerful than money. It's more powerful than nuclear weapons.
Absolutely. Again, we want to thank you for being with us on The Legacy of a Nation. And those of you who enjoyed the program, remember, you can help support us by going to www.paypal.com, strike gift, into the amount that you wish to help support The Legacy of a Nation, and into the email thelegacyofanation@yahoo.com. That's THELegacyofanation@yahoo.com. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, this is the most important moment for us. Do you have a closing thought for The Legacy of a Nation today, December 20th, 2014?
Well, my closing thought would be to begin with thanking you for having me, thanking the persons who participated, sharing their questions, and I hope that I gave some answers that could be useful, and that we all plan to move into the new year with a determination and commitment that we are going to solve the problem of racism, white supremacy. We're going to have the courage to not run from it and the self-respect to not run from it, and that we look forward to the challenges that we will face in the coming year, but we're going to see to it that we are going to be man and woman enough to confront the challenges, and with a determination, as I said, to be successful. And hopefully everyone will be safe during this holiday season, howsoever one may choose to recognize or celebrate the end of the year.
All right, thank you. I am in the UNI building at 1609 Cecil B. Moore Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19121. And it is time for us to open the building, and we have to get ready for a homegoing service for one of our dignitaries. He was the second commissioner for organizing. So we have a lot to do today. We want to thank Dr. Frances Cress Welsing again for being with us. We make a strong positive prayer that the weather will be with us in January, so that we can go to the lecture. We know how one year she makes the statement, the real white power stopped the lecture, and that was in the month of February. We're talking about the snow. So the next planned lecture will be January 8th. And those of you who would like to participate, you can meet us here at 1609 Cecil B. Moore, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19121. That's Cecil B. Moore Avenue, 1609 Cecil B. Moore Avenue. And meet us here by 2 o'clock so that we can make our way and be on time for the lecture in Washington, D.C. at the Blackburn Center at Howard University. Doctor, we want to thank you again for being with us, and all of the expressions and views are for those of you who have heard them to take them in. Make your deepest considerations before you make your next thought. Think about what it is you're doing and why. Remember the system in which you are in, because it definitely remembers you. And if you think I'm kidding, look at the time from 1609 until now. The sport killing of you has not changed. Look at the pictures of the 1920s. Look at the pictures in 1917. The photographs show entire families outside enjoying meals while hanging, burning, castrating, and mutilating you. And somehow this picture doesn't seem to faze you. It doesn't seem to faze those who have reached those high levels of education who want to continue to assimilate. Was integration a scientific experiment? Was integration a tool to continue to deprive the black people of their culture, of their economics, of their definition of self? Was it used to completely keep the dehumanizing process in place? There have been more experiments conducted on black people here in America. And see, we must research this. Look at it. There have been more experiments done on you here in America than any place else. But let's look that up and be sure that that is a statement of truth. The Tuskegee experiment has continued. The AIDS experiment continues. The Ebola experiments continue. All of these viruses and diseases and ethno-specific weapons have been launched against you through scientific study. They tell us, oh, if you give us your DNA, we can find your family here or there. They recently had one of their puppets on, Condoleezza Rice, who gave her DNA and talked about her grandmother being in slavery, sold for $470, and how she was 51% African and 40% European, and, you know, a little bit of something else. They use these powerful black images to keep the masses of us very confused. Why do we choose to identify with our oppressor? Do we recognize what Stockholm Syndrome is? When did it come into existence? And what is the importance of it? See, these are the questions that we need to ask. Now, just before we run completely out of time, I'm going to open all the microphones so we can do one of my favorite things, and that is repeating the statements that should give us the ultimate self-respect level for ourselves. And that statement, I want us to say in unison, if at all possible. And those who are making just a little bit of noise, all the microphones are open, so make sure that you stop as much noise as possible. Now, I want us to all give ourselves a big hug. Wrap your arms around yourself tightly. And those of you who have been with me before know that I want you to say, I love my black self. Come on, let's repeat it. I love my black self. That's right. Add that word beautiful in. I love my beautiful black self.
Black self.
All right. And then one of the most important statements, most black, most beautiful. All right. I want to thank you all for being with me this morning. And this is the close of the program. We've advertised the Black Seed. We've advertised going to see Dr. Frances Cress Welsing on the second Thursday of each month. We have thanked our guests more times than one, and we're going to thank them one more time because you just can't thank the great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing for being who she is and dedicated to her studies. Dedicated. One who has put their life where their measure of work is. Now, see, some of you may not recognize that she has sacrificed her life for the race. Some of you may not recognize the importance of the work that she does. But for me, that recognition is automatic. That recognition of being race first is automatic. You recognize where you are because that level of respect that we have for ourselves cannot be broken by anyone else. Once you recognize where you are as a people, and then your memory comes back to you, and you recognize that you are a God, nothing more can return you to the fate in which we have experienced. Again, this is the Legacy of a Nation. We appreciate all of your participation and look forward to you being with us again next Saturday on the Legacy of a Nation, the UNIA ACL State of the black race. Please send your support for the Black Seed Calendar to 1609 Cecil B. Moore Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19121. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, hello?
Wait a minute. Okay. I had to put you back in the chat room. The program went to an end, and so, it switched you back out into the program, but you're back with us now. So I just want to thank you again for being with us, and it's sincerely appreciated. Okay. All right. So, that's it. Thank you very much. And now it's just time to go. It's just me.
My daddy told me he loved me. He told me I was the best. He worked real hard